Hello and welcome to Real Time Recorded. This is Dave Michaels. I'm with Zias Caravala. Hello, Zias.
Hello, Dave. How you been?
It's been a hell of a week, Zias. It's been a hell of a week.
It's been hours since I've seen you.
That's true too. Let's see. As I recall, I last saw you when I kicked your butt in the trivia contest. This week had Google I/O, Zoom analyst event, Slack Frontiers in Europe. What else? Verint had an event.
Yeah.
Zendesk had an event. Cisco announced their results, and of course the cryptocurrencies all crashed. And so it's been a very, very busy, exhausting week. Which of those stand out to you most for this week, Zias?
Well, the fact that I finished fourth in the trivia contest certainly stood out. But I will say I had my internet access go down for 4 questions. I had to tether on my phone to get back in.
Yeah. Excuses.
I still almost won. So I think a good place to start would be the 8x8 event, Dave.
Actually, no. I want to start first with all these events because before we go into one of them, there was definitely one thing that stood out to me as I attended as many of these events as I could in person or after the fact or via Twitter, is the word platform is in. Everybody believes they're a platform. It is effectively the new word. It used to be everybody was a cloud company. Now everybody's a platform company. Although I get a little confused when the cloud companies talk about how they have out-of-the-box solutions. I think I heard that at both Five9 and Zoom. But I guess Amazon's a cloud company, and I got a bunch of Amazon boxes. So maybe it works. Maybe I don't know. I can't figure that one out. But I do want to say that platform is one of those words that gets used kind of like cloud. People have different meanings, different interpretations of it. To me, it means that you've got a lot of APIs and APIs that allow you to both integrate with other applications and for other applications to embed communications in them. SDKs, webhooks. I think there's a bonus if you've got like an app marketplace. Ability to, like I said, the ability to embed apps, embed your app inside other apps and vice versa, private apps. So I think there's a lot to this platform stuff, but it's becoming very, very blurry in our space because you've got the traditional applications like UCaaS and CCaaS are blurring with CPaaS now. And that's not only the blurred lines. We're seeing the blurred applications, which will bring me to 8x8 where you wanted to go. Let's talk about blurred applications, yes?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, the definition of platform, while it's used sort of loosey-goosey by the communication space, in the app world, it's pretty well understood. It's allowing others to build things on what you make. And it is important for the communications industry because if you look at every big software company, and I'm talking about the ones that become big, like a Salesforce or Microsoft, they're all platforms, right? They sell their out-of-the-box solution, if you want to call it that, but then other people can go build stuff on top of it. And that's why the CPaaS part is so important. In fact, if you think about what a platform is, and this is what 8x8 was trying to, I think, get at, is the product is CPaaS. And Alan Mazzarek at Vonage used to say this all the time, right? And Avaya has actually been starting to say this, that the product is CPaaS. There's CCaaS and UCaaS are simply examples of stuff you can build on top of the CPaaS. And I think that's, 8x8 kind of
sounds like composable.
It is composable, actually. And composable is a part of being a platform because that low-code, no-code way of developing is a way to let line of business people create these, throwaway widgets and stuff as a way to be able to create their own applications. And so
you can orchestrate your composability.
Yeah, if you want to throw more buzzwords in, that's fine. But I do think I thought the 8x8 event was I did like the term XCaaS, which I think you had some influence on that with them. It reminds me a lot of, in the security industry, is this term called XDR, which stands for Extended Detection and Response. So we're taking the concept of endpoint detection and response and we're broadening it. Similar with XCaaS, we're taking the concept of UCaaS or CCaaS and we're broadening it, and we're really making it kind of anything communications as a service, whether it's UCaaS, CCaaS, or some homegrown application. And I think 8x8 did a pretty good job of laying out that story. I do think they have made the pivot to a platform, and I think it's interesting because I think this was all set up by Vic Verma, their former CEO, that had a lot of good ideas, bought the right things, just really couldn't execute. So now, in comes Dave Sipes, and let's see if he can actually, get the execution engine. I think the hard part for all the UCAS, CCAS.
So Alan Masarek and Vic Firma are at a bar somewhere saying, we were right.
Well, they were. But the hard part about this is if you're selling CCAS, that's to one group of buyers. If you're selling UCAS, that's another group. And if you're selling CPAS to another one. So the act of cross-selling into the developers and the organizations that you sell telephony to isn't trivial. And I think that's going to be while all the vendors are using the term platform, the vendor that manages to crack that code and figure out how to cross-sell effectively will be the winner. And I think that's, I think we have yet to see how that plays out, because that is not anything.
One thing I want you to highlight, those is because you did such a good job on your no jitter post on the 8x8 one, is that a lot of these companies have been bundling their services, their UCAS and CCAS and video and whatever. But 8x8 was doing a little different than bundling. They were actually kind of cross-pollinating. Can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, well, they were right. And so I think if you ask a lot of the vendors, what's the value of buying UCAS and CCAS from the same vendor, they give you something that equates to purchase order integration. And while that's handy for small businesses, it's not really in what you would think of as game change. And I thought 8x8 actually made a pretty good case, taking a look at all the different ways the integration would work. For example, you can have seamless handoffs. So if you're a contact center agent, you take a call in. How often, Dave, do you call into a contact center, you get transferred to somebody else, and they're like, I have no idea what you're calling. And that's because you flip platforms. If you stay within the contact center, a lot of that context stays. But once you leave it, that goes away. And so you can see.
Yeah, that came up at the Zendesk conference this week, and they talked about how we'll be able to track all the customer interactions because we could, across multiple channels. I'm thinking, multiple channels within the contact center, but those people are calling multiple channels outside the contact center as well, and they're probably not tracking that, but I don't know. Yeah,
well, that's what 8x8's trying to get at with their XCAS, and so I do think that there's some validity to what they said. I think it's not a new story. I think what 8x8 managed to do that is new, though, is put a wrapper around it that's kind of market-facing, but also put a bunch of proof points together that were above and beyond purchase order integration.
So definite trend around blurring of the silos, but another trend that's kind of popping up because 2 weeks in a row, Zoom this week announced their new virtual events platform coming soon. I was excited. I thought we were going to use it in the analyst event, but no, it's coming soon. It's an all-in-one solution to produce interactive virtual events. And this is very, very similar to what Cisco just announced last week with the acquisition of Socio, virtual events platform. So it's actually kind of really, it shows a couple of things. It shows a trend. You got two now. And it also kind of validates kind of past history. Zoom builds, Cisco acquires, and they both have their advantages and disadvantages, but it's a different topic. And I think this is a little bit in response to just a few months ago, Microsoft announced that they're including webinars in their standard regular licensing. So we're seeing a convergence of apps, platforms, and adjacent apps as well. Is this?
Yeah, Microsoft announced webinars. Welcome to 1995. I guess if you can't disrupt on innovation, you should disrupt by giving the product away, which is what Microsoft is doing. So, the events play from Zoom and Cisco was pretty interesting. This is where the blurring of that term platform comes from, because events is yet another use case for communications, and so whether it's UCAS, CCAS, CPAS, events, or whatever, and this is why having that underlying platform is important, so you can build these things on top of it or buy and plug it in if you're Cisco, because it is a kind of different specialized use case in which the interaction between people is quite different. One of the things that neither one of them really addressed, which was brought up actually in the analyst conference, is how they try and do ad hoc, right? And I had ad hoc, kind of like at the cocktail party, I had brought up the idea of why couldn't you have some sort of clubhouse functionality and where everybody just kind of gets together? Because how many times do you go into an event where maybe you poke your head into a room, you don't really like it and you leave without having to go register for it and stuff like that, right? So I think we're getting closer on being able to actually replicate what a live event is, although we'll never really get there, but I think there's still a lot of stuff missing. And this, I think, Zoom actually, while they debuted the events platform at their event, I think the big coming out party for them was platform. Like it was with 8x8, and they talked a lot about Zoom Phone and the Zoom apps play. The one thing that you asked, actually, that Eric kind of brushed off a little bit was what they do in contact center. And I can't for the life of me see how they can avoid contact center. They're sitting on a huge pile of cash. Wall Street's eventually going to get restless and want to see him do something with that. Eric can say what he wants, that he is, doesn't really have any interest in it right now. But I got to believe.
He had a very articulate, clear answer that could be anything.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's coming. I just think I think they want to conquer the world of phone first and stick it to Ring Central. And I think then they'll go after contact center.
Another event this week was Google I/O. This was kind of an interesting Google I/O because normally it's all about Android and all about mobile. This was a little broader. And I want to highlight just a few things. There's a lot of stuff out of Google I/O, but it's just a few things in our space. They're also tearing down boundaries. Javier Sotero came out and talked about Workspace. And it was actually the opening keynote. Came right out early and kicked this off. And I think this is a lot of a response to Microsoft Teams, to be honest. They're real. And what they're doing is they are Smart Canvas and Smart what's the other name? Smart Widgets, something like that. They're bringing their apps much closer together, and so this involves a much more tighter integration between things like Docs and Sheets and slides, and they're really, you can put data in one and it updates in the other. You can put files, you can put people, all kinds of stuff, and it's really tearing down these boundaries between these apps. And I think this is a very different approach than, say, Microsoft, which is also tearing down the boundaries between apps, but they're doing it with a brand new client called Teams. So it's a brand new app where Google is using, well, first off, no fat client, it's all web-based, but secondly, it's they're integrating them through upgrading existing apps, and a very different approach. I think it's really interesting what they're doing. It's got app mentions, and when you do the ad sign, you can mention people, you can mention files, you can do all kinds of stuff with this stuff. And I think it's just really interesting what they're doing. I think they're really going after the Asana crowd, and Asana, of course, is tightly integrated with Slack, and so you got Asana, Slack over here, you got Microsoft Teams over here. So this is definitely a new battlefield kind of emerging, in my opinion. They also made some pretty big improvements to video. They're bringing Meet right into Google Docs and Google Sheets, so you don't have to switch apps. You can just start a meeting right in the doc. I think that's pretty interesting. Again, similar to what Microsoft's doing, but different. And they also introduced companion mode, which looked very similar to what we saw at Zoom as well. But companion mode is when you have a room system, let's say 3 people in a room, that instead of seeing that table, the bowling alley view with the 3 heads around it, they're actually going to smart crop and edit and have 3 different people in tiles. And so you've got everybody having their own tile, which is an interesting, the Brady Bunch look. Zoom's calling that smart gallery mode. And so that's the latest thing in visual effects. I think it's pretty interesting. Zeus, any thoughts on Google I/O?
Yeah, not just that. If you're a fast follower following Microsoft, who's a fast follower following the rest of the industry, you're actually kind of behind. I've been sort of disappointed in Google. It's good to see them come up with some of these innovations, but a few years ago, I really thought by now Google would be one of the dominant communication players in the industry, just because in theory, everything should have been integrated.
They're always just 1 year away from being the leading player. Yep.
Yeah, and every year, I think in the No Jitter predictions, I used to predict this would be the year of Google, and lo and behold, it wasn't. And so I don't know. Google does a lot of interesting things. I'm still not convinced they really care about enterprise communications all that much. When you look at the TAM of what enterprise communications is, even if they captured 50% of the market, I don't know if it would really move the needle from a Google revenue perspective, compared to how big their search business is. So in some ways, I understand where the lack of investment and the lack of time has been, but they either need to get in or get out. And I think the most notable thing, I think, was the integration with all the apps and stuff like that, because Google apps are very popular when you get into K through 12 and younger people like that. So if they can create some viral adoption that way, that's probably their best route. Dave, also this week, Cisco announced their earnings, and we do some coverage of numbers here, and I think the Cisco numbers were important just because they are such a bellwether, and I thought they reported pretty good numbers. They got a little bit beat up for soft guidance based on some of the stuff going to the chip shortage, but their fiscal Q3, they did come in about $232 million above street expectations, which was equivalent to 7% growth, and for year over year, for a company that big, That's pretty remarkable. They also beat EPS by a penny. I think a couple of big takeaways for me is we are on the verge of people going back to work. When you look at the product strength they showed, infrastructure platforms was up 6%, security was up 13%. They specifically called out switching and Wi-Fi, which had been dead for a while because people weren't going in the office. WebEx also was up double digits, right? So I think when you look at the strength they had across the board, when I talk to customers, they're buying things in anticipation of people going back to the office. And so this world that we've had where everybody's been, working from home forever, and we have ghost towns in city centers, I think we're pretty close to having that go away. The other really notable data point to me was that, and I didn't realize this, that the software business at Cisco is now at a $14 billion run rate. 14 billion. That there's only 4 software companies: Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, and Salesforce that are actually bigger than that. Their software revenue is bigger than VMware, and that's something 5 years ago. I mean, if they had a couple of billion in revenue in software, that was amazing. So I think they've turned that corner, and you're seeing much more investment. We've seen it just in the last year with WebEx, right? That the amount of change that's been there. So I thought overall it was a pretty good quarter. The stock's been hampered with this overhang of the chip shortage because everything they have, from WebEx boards to phones to switches to routers, have chips in them. So we'll see how long that hangs. But they've kind of really come back around from where they were a few years ago.
Yeah, I think they're in a really good position actually. I get asked a lot about the trends of going forward, what's going to really be popping up. And there's 2 things that I think are really going to be popping up. One is this conversation with the hybrid office, and don't get me going on the hybrid office, but there is some reality of the hybrid office. And I think Cisco's in a pretty good position, particularly with that, the Desk Hub, I think it's called. It's one of the most innovative devices that I've seen out there that's for a hybrid office, where it's basically a phone designed for hoteling, designed for video, and I think it's got a lot of potential once the offices start opening up again. The other thing that I think is really going to be a big trend, which they're also positioned around, is calendaring with conference rooms as offices move more and more spaces to multi-purpose rooms, not just video rooms, but just multi-purpose rooms. I just published a report on this. There's Microsoft's just got in this space. Crestron's been in this space. You've got Zoom with their partner Neat. Making these room panels, and Cisco just launched the Navigator. So as we reimagine how we do our offices, I think these little tablet-style devices on rooms are going to become much more important for scheduling, wayfinding, all kinds of stuff. And we're going to have some real competition, and I think it's going to be an explosive area in the next couple of years, starting this year. So yeah, I think
you like the market a lot.
Position around those 2.
Yeah, you've liked the market a lot. Oh, and before we wrap up, I wanted to give a shout-out to Verve Vertanen, formerly of Poly, who will be the new VP of AR and market intelligence at Mitel. She's been a friend of the analyst community for a long time. So congratulations, Verve. I'm very happy for you.
And so formerly of Poly, but before that, of course, was formerly of Polycom. Yeah. And she was there at the same time as Mary, who is the current CEO of Mitel. So the band is getting back together again. Yeah. So, and one last thing, I booked my tickets to Enterprise Connect. Are you going to be there as well?
I will be there. I think we're both speaking at it, so I think we have to be there. So,
well, I've been speaking at a lot of events without going to them, but maybe I guess things are changing. Okay,
I think there's a podium with your name on it, though.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Real Time Recorded. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back maybe next week, most likely in 2 weeks with week 22. 21, 22.
22.
Thanks.